The first thing people noticed was not the house. It was the roof. Not the old roof. The one already sitting over Miriam Vale's cabin on the eastern shoulder of the Wallowa Mountains. The second one. A huge sloping timber roof standing 5 feet above the first, wrapped around the cabin like an upside-down boat hull. It did not touch the original walls. It did not match the lines of the house. It made the cabin look as if Miriam had built a barn around it, then forgotten the barn's walls. By late October of 1888, every person in Pine Hollow had an opinion about it. Most of those opinions were spoken at the counter of Silas Crow's Mercantile, and most of them ended with the same word, mad. Miriam knew. She heard it when she came down for nails. She heard it when she bought tar paper, lamp oil, rock wool, iron braces, and 60 yards of canvas belting. She heard it in the small pause that came after her name. Miriam Vale. The widow up on Deadman's Spur. The one building a roof over her roof. The one who had lost her husband in the whiteout of '82 and never properly returned from it. On the last Thursday in October, Miriam drove the final iron pin through the northern support beam. The hammer strike rang once, sharp and clean, then vanished into the spruce below. She stepped back and looked up. The new roof rose above her cabin in a broad black pitch, steep enough to shed a mule if one ever walked across it. Its ribs bolted into stone footings she had poured by hand. Between the two roofs was an empty air chamber, narrow at the eaves and taller at the ridge, packed along the windward side with split cedar, sheep's wool, and pumice gravel. To a passerby, it looked absurd. To Miriam, it looked like a lung, a way for the cabin to breathe without freezing. A way to stop the mountain from pressing its teeth directly against the old roof. She set down the hammer, flexed her fingers, looked at the line of black clouds sitting over the far northern ridge, too low and too still to be weather yet. Then she went inside. The cabin had been built by her husband Elias in 1873. Elias had known timber. He knew which logs would twist, which would hold, which slope kept winter sun the longest, and which gullies filled with snow deep enough to bury a horse. What he had not known was that a storm could change direction after dark. In January of 1882, he had gone out to pull a neighbor's ox from a drift 2 miles down the trail. The storm was supposed to pass east by midnight. It did not pass east. It folded back. Miriam found him the next afternoon, less than 300 yards from their cabin. He had followed the creek too low and missed the ridge path by a few degrees. In clear weather, the mistake would have made him curse and laugh. In that weather, it killed him. His left hand was still closed around the little brass compass she had given him the year they married. After the burial, Miriam bought 800 yards of red survey line from a rail crew passing through Pine Hollow. She coiled it on a peg beside the door. For 6 years it hung there. People asked about it at first. She told them it was for marking timber. That was true enough, but it was not the reason. The reason was that 300 yards had been close enough for Elias to die. So Miriam bought enough line to go twice that distance and still come back. Now the red line had a new anchor on the outside of the strange second roof, just beneath the north eave. Miriam had bolted a steel eye into a granite block sunk 4 feet into the ground. The red survey line ran through that eye, then back inside beside the stove. The knot was ugly. It was also perfect. She checked it every morning. That was one of the things Pine Hollow never saw. What they saw was the structure. What they saw was a widow hauling timber up a mountain and building something no one had asked for. What they heard was Silas Crow naming it. Mrs. Vale's Sky Barn, he said one afternoon in September. loud enough for every man in the mercantile to enjoy it. The name stuck. By October, even children used it. Miriam never corrected them. Correction requires an audience willing to be corrected. Pine Hollow was not. But one person did not laugh. Ruth Ashfoot came up the mountain 2 days after the second roof was finished. She was 71, Nez Perce on her mother's side, French trapper somewhere on her father's, and older than nearly every fence line in the valley. She had watched the old trails turn into wagon roads, and the wagon roads turn into arguments about ownership. Ruth stopped in the yard, looked at Miriam's second roof from one end to the other, and gave a single nod. "That will help," she said. Miriam poured coffee. They sat by the window while the afternoon light turned thin and metallic. Ruth warmed her hands around the cup. "The high elk came down early," Ruth said. "I saw. The beaver have sealed the upper creek twice as thick." "I saw that too." Ruth looked toward the northern ridge, and the ravens left before the frost. Miriam said nothing. She had seen that as well. 3 signs could be coincidence, 4 could be argument. 5 was testimony. Miriam had been keeping weather notes since Elias died. 6 years of temperatures, wind shifts, snow depth, thaw dates, animal movement, ice thickness, cloud color, and the sound the spruce made before a hard front arrived. That year, the record had begun to lean in one direction. The old cold was coming, not a hard winter. Something older than that. Ruth sipped her coffee. "When I was a girl," she said, "there was a winter that took 11 people before the moon changed." Miriam looked up. "Did they know?" "My uncle knew," he said. "The animals were moving wrong. The creek was speaking too low. The sky had iron in it." "What did people say?" Ruth's mouth moved in something too tired to be a smile. "They said he had become lonely and was talking to weather." Miriam glanced toward town, though town could not be seen from the cabin. Ruth followed her eyes. "They name what they refuse to learn," she said. "Then, when they need it, they ask what the name means." The first official trouble came in November. Deputy Caleb Ward rode up with a folded notice in his coat pocket, an apology already written into his face. The complaint had been filed by Henry Larkin, who owned the new glass front house below Miriam's ridge. It claimed the northern roof footing crossed a disputed survey line. It ordered Miriam to stop all construction until the territorial office reviewed the claim in spring. Miriam read the notice once. Then she looked at the sky. A line of violet gray had formed beyond the high ridge, thin as a bruise. "Deputy," she said, "I will not remove a beam before winter." Caleb shifted his weight. "Mrs. Vale, I'm required to serve it. You have served it, I'm also allowed to enforce it." "You are." The wind moved through the spruce, and the second roof gave a low wooden breath above them. Caleb looked at the roof, then at the red line, then back at Miriam. He placed the notice on a stump, weighted it with a stone, and mounted his horse. "I'll be checking the road before first snow," he said. Miriam nodded. Neither of them said what had just happened. He had not helped her, but he had not stopped her. Sometimes, in a small town, mercy arrives disguised as hesitation. The loudest man in Pine Hollow was not Henry Larkin. It was Edwin Bell. Edwin was 29, educated in Portland, funded by a father who owned ships, and newly arrived in the valley with plans to build a mountain resort for gentlemen who wanted wilderness without inconvenience. His lodge sat below Miriam's ridge with 12 tall windows facing the view, and a polished iron furnace shipped in by rail. He first saw Miriam's roof in September. He stopped his horse at her fence and stared. "What exactly is that meant to do?" he called. "Keep the cold from landing where I sleep," Miriam said. "You already have a roof, yes? So you built another one?" "Yes," he smiled, as if she had just completed his point for him. 2 weeks later, at Silas Crow's Mercantile, Edwin performed the story for an audience. "Mrs. Vale is not heating her house," he announced. "She is hiding it under a hat." The men laughed. Silas laughed first, because Silas liked to decide when a room was allowed to. Miriam had come in for lamp oil and a spool of copper wire. She placed her coins on the counter. Edwin turned toward her. "I do admire preparedness," he said, "though I confess I have never seen fear expressed architecturally." Miriam paused with her hand on the door. She did not turn around. "I am not afraid of winter, Mr. Bell," she said. "I am unwilling to flatter it." Then she walked out. The room behind her went quiet in that brief, uncomfortable way rooms do when laughter has been struck in the mouth. But only briefly. By supper, the joke had recovered. December came gently, too gently. The valley relaxed. The snow fell light. The creek skinned over but did not close. Men who had split extra wood began to feel foolish, and men who had not began to feel wise. Silas Crow said the season had lost its teeth. Miriam heard that and bought more lamp oil. Ruth left the mountain on January 6th. That was the sign Miriam had not wanted. Ruth had not left her cabin for winter in 16 years. She came to Miriam at the edge of town carrying a bundle wrapped in brown cloth. "Willow bark," Ruth said, "ginger, honey, bear fat, and the black root." Miriam took it. "How many?" Ruth looked toward the White Mountains. "Enough to keep you awake." Then she touched Miriam's sleeve. "It is not for you," Miriam understood. She placed the bundle on the shelf above the stove when she got home, beside Elias's weather book and the brass compass that had been in his hand when she found him. On January 13th, the sky became clear in a way that did not belong to Mercy. At dawn, it was blue as fired glass. By noon, the air had stopped moving. By 2, Miriam felt the pressure drop in her jaw. By 3, the spruce went silent. Not quiet, silent. There is a difference. Quiet is the absence of noise. Silence is the arrival of attention. Miriam filled every pot with water, stacked wood beside the stove, looped the red line through the steel eye and checked the knot twice. Then a third time, because twice was superstition and 3 was work. At 3:40, the northern sky turned green-black. At 4:05, the wind arrived. It did not build, it struck. The second roof took the first blow with a crack that ran through every beam. The cabin shuddered once, then settled. Inside, the stove flame did not bend. The old roof did not groan. The air chamber above it swallowed the impact and held it there, away from the house, away from the heat, away from Miriam's bones. She sat by the stove, opened Elias's weather book, and wrote, "Wind north by northeast, pressure falling. Extreme cold front, structure holding." Then she listened to the mountain begin to test every person on it. At Edwin Bell's lodge, the expensive furnace failed first. The iron stack rose 12 feet above the roofline, because the architect thought height looked elegant against the view. At 9:18 that night, ice sealed the upper pipe. The furnace lost draw, smoke pushed backward through the vents. Edwin opened one of the tall view windows. The wind entered like an animal. He slammed it shut. but the frame had warped from the sudden cold. A gap opened along the latch side. He packed it with a curtain, then a coat, then a rug. The wind came through anyway. By midnight, the water pitcher beside his bed was frozen solid. By 1, Edwin was wearing 2 shirts, a coat, 3 pairs of socks, and the expression of a man discovering that money is not a weatherproof material. He thought about Miriam's cabin. Then he thought about Silas's mercantile, the laughter, the hat joke, the word fear. So he stayed. Pride is warm for about 10 minutes. After that, it begins using your body for fuel. Below the ridge, Henry and Clara Larkin were awake in their glass front house. The house had been built to display the valley. That night, the valley came inside. The wind drove needles of ice against the south windows for hours. The largest pane flexed inward with every gust, humming like a wire. Clara watched it, Henry said. The glass was imported. Clara said imported glass still broke. Henry told her she was frightened. Clara said yes. That was when he stopped having an answer. At 20:11 in the morning, a dead pine lifted from the upper slope. It did not fall. It flew. The trunk struck the central window, and the window exploded into the room. Not cracked. Exploded. The fire in the hearth vanished in 4 seconds. Snow blasted across the rug, the table, the chairs, the staircase. The house became a frame pretending to be shelter. Clara grabbed blankets. Henry grabbed the lantern. The lantern went out before they reached the back door. They left anyway. There was only one warm place on that ridge, and it belonged to the woman Henry had tried to stop. The walk was half a mile. In summer, it took 10 minutes. That night, it took almost an hour, and nearly took Clara's left hand with it. When they reached Miriam's yard, they did not see the cabin. They hit the second roof support first, a black timber shape rising out of the white like the side of a ship. Henry found the door by touch. He struck it once, then again. Then his strength ran out, and Clara struck it with him. For one terrible moment, the sound disappeared into the storm and did not return. Then the door opened. Miriam stood in the entry with a lamp in one hand and a wool blanket in the other. She did not look surprised. Inside, she said. The passage beneath the second roof was freezing, but it was still no wind. After the storm outside, stillness felt like heat. Miriam shut the outer door, opened the inner one, and the cabin's warmth came over them. So suddenly, Clara made a sound like pain. Wet things off, Miriam said. Now, Henry tried to speak. Mrs. Vale, I need to... Coat first, confession later. She moved them to the stove, wrapped Clara's hand, put honey and ginger in warm water, checked their faces, their fingers, their breathing. Then she asked the question neither of them had. Where is Edwin Bell? Henry looked at Clara. Clara closed her eyes. We passed his lodge, she said. He answered. He said he was going to the stable for more blankets. Miriam looked at the clock. 3:06. The stable was below the lodge, across an open slope. How long ago? Henry swallowed. More than an hour. Miriam stood, Clara said. You cannot go out there. Miriam was already taking the red survey line from its peg. Henry struggled to rise. I'll go. Miriam looked at him once. You'll fall before the first spruce. He did not argue. That was how she knew fear had finally made him intelligent. She tied the line through the steel eye, pulled the knot until it bit, and wrapped the free rope around her wrist. Keep Clara's fingers red, she told Henry. If they turn white, Put them under your shirt against your chest. Do not warm them by the stove." Henry nodded. Clara looked at Miriam. "Please come back." Miriam opened the outer door. The storm took her. The cold was not a temperature, it was a force. It pressed into her eyes, her ears, the seam of her gloves, the wet wool over her mouth. It tried to find the places where a body is only temporarily alive. Miriam moved with one hand on the red line, always the line to the roof, the line to the door, the line to the stove. Every 20 steps she stopped and looked through Elias's old field glass. It was not made for darkness, but she had polished and altered the lens until it could catch the faintest difference between snow and living heat. First stop. Nothing. Second. Nothing. Third, a shape beside the lower stable fence. Not standing. Not moving. Warmth fading. The last 30 yards took longer than the first 100. Edwin lay curled against the fence rail with his coat open and his hat placed neatly in the snow beside him. That neatness frightened her more than panic would have. The dying cold tells a person they are warm. It gives them one final, perfect lie. She pressed her ear to his chest. One beat, a long space. Another, "All right," she said, though the wind stole the words. Not yet. She closed his coat, hooked the red line across her forearm, got under his shoulder. He was heavier than he looked. Everyone is, when they cannot help you. She lifted. For a moment, nothing in her body agreed to continue. Then the part of her that had crossed frozen fields as a nurse in the war, the part that had dragged men by their belts while cannon smoke froze on the ground, the part that had found Elias 300 yards too late, gave its old command. Move, so she moved, yard by yard. Rope through glove, snow to thigh, wind in the ribs, Edwin's weight dragging her left side toward the ground. Once, she fell to one knee and stayed there long enough for the cold to offer its bargain rest. Just rest. Miriam put her right hand on the red line and pulled. Not on Edwin, not on herself. On the promise that the other end was tied to home. She got up when her shoulder struck the first support post of the second roof. The sound went through her like a bell. Wood, built wood. Her wood. She found the door, dragged Edwin into the still passage, closed the storm out behind them. For 3 seconds, she stood beneath the ridiculous roof everyone had laughed at, with a half-dead man over her shoulder, and breathed air that was not trying to kill her. Then she opened the inner door. Henry took Edwin's weight without that mattered. Clara cleared the floor by the stove. That mattered too. Miriam opened Ruth's bundle and worked inside the narrow space between too fast and too late. Warm water, not hot blankets at the core. Not the limbs honey, ginger, willow bark, feet raised. Breath watched, pulse counted, no shouting, no drama, only sequence. At 4:20, Edwin began to shiver. Violently, beautifully. Miriam put one hand on his sternum and felt the body choose to fight. By dawn, his eyes followed the ceiling beams. "At noon," he whispered. "Is this your cabin?" "Yes. It's warm." "It is." He closed his eyes. After a while, he said, "The roof works." Miriam gave him another spoon of honey water. "Yes," she said, "that was the idea." The storm lasted 3 days. The world beyond Miriam's double roof disappeared. The road vanished. The Larkin house stood open to the south, its grand windows black holes full of snow. Edwin's lodge remained upright, but useless. A handsome structure that had never been asked a serious question before, and had answered poorly. Inside Miriam's cabin, 4 people lived by the rules of the stove, the walls, and the woman who understood both. Henry slept in a chair. Clara took the narrow bed because her hand needed watching. Edwin lay on blankets near the stove. Miriam slept in pieces 2 hours at most, then up to check the fire, the roof braces, the drift load, the color of Clara's fingers, the tremor in Edwin's breathing, the knot in the red line. On the second day, Henry went into the passage under the second roof. Miriam watched through the little window. He was restacking the split cedar along the north side, turning the bark inward and the cut face out. It was a small correction. A real one. The kind a person only sees after he has stopped defending himself from the truth. When he came back inside, Miriam handed him coffee. He stared into the cup. "I filed that complaint," he said. "I know. I'll withdraw it." "You should." He looked up, not offended, relieved. "I thought the law made me right." "No," Miriam said. "It only gave you a longer sentence to be wrong in." Henry accepted that as if it were deserved. Outside, the wind hit the second roof and slid over it. Later that night, Edwin woke while the others were quiet. "Mrs. Vale?" "Yes." "The red line," he said. "Why red?" Miriam did not answer immediately. The stove clicked. Snow hissed against timber. "My husband died in a whiteout," she said. "He was close enough to this cabin that I should have been able to hear him, but there was no line. No mark, nothing to follow." Edwin stared at the fire. How close? 300 yards. His face changed. And this line? 800. For once, he did not perform his intelligence. He simply understood something and let it hurt. "I called it fear," he said. "Yes. I was wrong. Yes. I'm sorry." Miriam looked at the young man on her floor, hands bandaged, pride frostbitten worse than his fingers. "When you build again," she said, "build for the night that will not admire you." He nodded once. Then slept. On the 4th morning, the storm stopped. Not softened, stopped. The sky cleared blue from the west, and the ridge emerged under a depth of snow that made every familiar thing strange. Deputy Caleb Ward arrived that afternoon on snowshoes, face raw from wind. Miriam opened the outer door. He looked at her. "Everyone alive. Everyone." He looked past her at the second roof, at the red line, at the beams he had been asked to make her remove. "I read the survey again," he said. "The footing was never on Larkin land." Miriam waited. "I should have read it that way before the storm." "Yes," he nodded. "You were right not to enforce it. That is not the same as being right." "No," Miriam said. "But it is not nothing." Caleb took that with him down the trail. By the 5th day, Silas Crow came with supplies in a wagon. His daughter, Anna, came too. She was 16 and had been in the mercantile the day Edwin joked about fear. Miriam remembered her because Anna had started to laugh and then stopped, as if some better part of her had caught the sound by the throat. Anna carried flour, coffee, lamp oil, cornmeal, and clean linen through the snow without waiting for instructions. Silas stood by the wagon, hat in hand, looking at the second roof. For the first time in all the years Miriam had known him, he did not seem to be waiting for a room to laugh with him. He came inside for coffee. He held the cup in both hands. After a long silence, he asked, "How did you know?" Miriam thought about Elias's weather book, Ruth's warnings, the ravens, the beaver dams, the elk, the green, black sky, the old grief that had taught her to measure distance in rope. "I paid attention," she said, "and I did not stop because the answer was inconvenient." Silas looked at the floor. Anna looked at Miriam. "Will you teach me?" The room went quiet. Miriam studied the girl's face, the practical hands, the eyes that had refused to laugh when laughter was easiest. "In spring," Miriam said, "when the upper trail clears, we'll start with the ravens." Anna nodded as if she had just been handed a map. That evening, after Henry and Clara had gone back down the ridge, after Edwin had been taken to the clinic, after Silas's wagon tracks had hardened in the snow, Miriam sat alone by the stove with Elias's weather book open. She wrote the dates, January 13th through 16th. 1889, wind direction temperature, snow depth, structural performance, injuries, recoveries. She wrote Henry Larkin corrected north insulation stack without prompting. She wrote Clara Larkin retained all fingers. She wrote Edwin Bell recovered after exposure approximately 2 hours. Then she paused. The brass compass lay beside the book. For 6 years, she had wondered whether she stayed on that mountain because she had chosen it, or because grief had tied her there tighter than any rope. The answer had come in the storm, not as comfort as work. She was there because the mountain spoke in signs and someone needed to listen. Because Elias had taught her timber, because Ruth had taught her weather. Because grief had taught her distance, because knowledge that saves a life is not meant to end with the person who paid for it. In spring, Anna would come up the trail. Miriam would show her the ravens first, then bark, then creek sound, then how to tell the difference between a sky that is empty and a sky that is waiting. Miriam closed the book. Outside, the stars over the Wallowas burned clear and indifferent, brighter after the storm had scraped the air clean of everything temporary. She stood, went to the peg beside the door, and ran the red line through her hands from end to end 800 yards. No phrase, no breaks, all of it intact. She coiled it back slowly. Then she put one more log on the fire and let the roof above the roof hold the night where it belonged.